Hey everyone, welcome back to Civics Review. Today we're going to talk about parties. Political parties. Well, let's get to it. Politics in general is something we try to avoid talking about at all costs, because it makes people feel super awkward and we would much rather talk about something else, anything else. But today, we have to talk about politics, and so we're gonna rip the lid off of it. There are so many resources on political parties with so many frivolous facts and information you don't need to know for your test. And so today, we are going to strip it down to the bare necessities and teach you the must-knows for this unit and throw everything else away so you can focus your remaining attention on more important things. You're welcome.
What is this?
So what is a political party? The definition we're going to use is an organization of people who share similar views about the way the government should be run. That's it. It's not super complicated.
It's almost too easy.
It's simply a group of people. But the common thread that unites this group of people is the way they believe the government should be working. And the best way this group of people can make an influence or change on the government is by getting their candidate, their guy that thinks the same way they do, elected into office. Now, the United States of America has a lot of political parties. Just look at this list. And remember, these are all just organizations or groups of people. Now, even though there are all... wait a minute. What are you doing here? Now, even though we have all of these political parties in our country, we actually refer to the United States as a two-party system. And this is something very important you need to know for your test. Now, our two-party system is talking about the Democrats and the Republicans. And that's not to mean that we don't have other parties. I just showed you other parties. We call these other parties third parties. We'll get to them in a minute. But we call it a two-party system because these are the only two major political parties that are most likely to win any given election. Observe: Biden, Democrat; Trump, Republican; Obama, Democrat; Bush, Republican; Clinton, Democrat; Bush, Republican; Reagan, Republican; Carter, Democrat; Ford, Republican; Nixon, Republican. We can go on and on all the way to the 1850s until we find another political party that won the presidency. The two major political parties are most likely going to win the election, and that's why we call it a two-party system. In addition to winning virtually every election, the Democrats and the Republicans, these two major political parties, are also featured on every single voting ballot. Meaning, if you are a candidate for the Democrats or the Republicans, your name is going to appear on the voting paper. If you represent a third party, one of the little guys, you're not necessarily guaranteed a spot on the voting ballot. This is a huge advantage for the major parties and a very big disadvantage for all the other third parties. Alright, so let's focus in on the two major political parties because one of the most typical questions you're going to see on your test is which of these major political parties would support this issue or idea. The Democrats support more government involvement, and so that includes things like raising the minimum wage, healthcare for everyone, and saving the environment. All of these issues need lots of taxes to happen, and so Democrats are very cool with increasing the taxes, especially for the wealthy, to help pay for these benefits that everyone's going to get. The other major political party, the Republican Party, is the opposite. They support less government interference. They're going to be hands-off with the economy and telling businesses to raise the minimum wage. They're not going to do that. They're going to let people choose their own healthcare, or at least not tell them everyone has to have this particular healthcare. And with less government interference comes less government programs. There's no need for them if the government's not going to interfere. And so that will create lower taxes for everyone. Everybody will have more money to put in their own pocket, but less social programs will be provided for the people. Now, there's all other kinds of issues that we haven't really talked about, like immigration, education, or military spending. But when you understand the basics of the two parties, that one supports more government involvement and the other supports less, each political party's stance on the issue should make sense. Now, this is not an either-or situation. You might find yourself agreeing with some Republican ideas and some Democrat ideas, in which case you'd be somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Or you might lean slightly towards one party and say, I agree with more of their ideas, but I still have some ideas I agree with the other party. And then there's some of us that agree entirely with the political party's ideologies and issues. But believe it or not, these political parties do share some similarities. We've already talked about the first similarity, and that is these are political parties. They are organizations or groups of people that have the same view about public issues and the way the government should be run. And the second similarity is both of these political parties are going to try and get their candidate elected so that they can start to make changes in government. Both parties will nominate their best candidate to try and win this election. They're going to choose the person that is the most likable, the person that agrees with their views on government, the person they believe can actually get the job done, and they're going to try and put that person on the voting ballot. Both groups are also going to create a platform, which is like a list of goals they want to accomplish if their person is elected into office. These platforms are critical for voters to understand who is this candidate, what will they do if they're elected into office. All right, let's switch gears and go back to third parties. Now, taking a look again at all of these political parties, if we remove the two major parties, we're left with all of the rest, and all the rest are called third parties. And third parties are defined as any political party that is not one of the major two parties. So let's start off by looking at the role in democracy of these third parties. I mean, what's the real point? If these third parties aren't going to be on every ballot and are probably not going to win an election, what is their purpose? And the first purpose is to give voters more options. While voters are oftentimes presented with two of the best available options, which in this case would be Democrats or Republicans, there's always going to be people out there that don't like what they see. They'd rather have something else. Variety is the spice of life, and having the same thing over and over again can get really boring. And having more options is better, even if those other options aren't as popular. I know there's a bunch of students out there right now that says, I'd rather have a bag of Takis, and I really can't understand you. If you were to poll all of America and say which bag of chips would you like, you'd probably get a boring answer like classic or salt and vinegar. But those people that enjoy Takis are going to choose Takis, even though they know it's probably not going to win this vote. But I like what I like, and that's what I'm picking. Another role in democracy third parties have is they focus on more specific issues. Take the Libertarian Party, which focuses on individual liberties, and the Green Party, which focuses on environmental issues. Now, of course, the major political parties care about these issues, but it's not really their central focus. They have a large umbrella of issues that they care about, and they put into their party platform. The reason in which they don't focus on one or two particular issues is they're trying to get as many votes as possible, and by saying, this is our platform, these are all of the issues we care about, they're gonna get more votes so they can get their guy elected into office. A third party doesn't really care about that. They say, look, this is the major issue that's important to us. All the other issues take a back seat compared to this one specific thing, and some voters out there really appreciate that. They say, me too. That's the most important thing to me. The other things can wait or are not as important to me right now, but this focal issue is what we should be most concerned about now today in America. Now, third parties also have an influence on elections, and I know you're thinking, hey, come on, they're not going to win the election. How can they have an impact on the election? Well, not so fast. We've been talking about winning the presidential election, which hasn't been done by a third party in a long time. However, when citizens vote for lawmakers, like the senators and the members of the House of Representatives, occasionally one or two third-party members will win that election. Let's take a look at the United States Senate. These are lawmakers for the federal government. You can see the blue dots represent the Democrats and the red dots represent the Republicans. But these yellow dots over here, these represent lawmakers that are either independent of the two major parties or they belong to third parties. So third parties do win sometimes in the House and the Senate, but let's talk about the 1992 presidential election, where we saw a third party or independent candidate actually challenge the two major parties' presidential nominees. In 1992, the incumbent president was President Bush, and he represented the Republican Party. The challenger was Bill Clinton. He represents the Democratic Party. But along comes this independent guy named Ross Perot. He's not a politician, but he is a billionaire. And he challenges the two major parties by saying to the American people, I can do things a little bit differently. I'm that bag of Takis everybody's been craving. Let's not go with regular or salt and vinegar. Let's take America in a different direction. And that really resonated with a lot of people. Now, in fact, Ross Perot nearly got 20 million votes in that 1992 election. While he didn't actually carry any states, he didn't win any electoral votes for himself, he did take nearly 20 million votes away from the two major parties. And many people will say that that had an impact on the election.
In Texas, and just 2 percentage points separating them there, and about 51,000 votes altogether. Ross Perot, 20% of the vote in Texas, probably took away a number of votes from President Bush in that state. The Bush people now beginning to believe that they made a mistake.
So you can see third parties can have an influence on elections. They're not always going to win, but the people who do vote for a third party member are not casting a vote for a major party member who's most likely to win. So let's review again what we need to know for the actual test. Number 1, what is a political party? Number 2, why does America have a two-party system? What does that mean when we say two parties? Number 3, you need to be able to compare the two major political parties. What issues do they stand for and believe in? And finally, what are third parties? What is their role in democracy? How do they influence elections? Okay, that's it for now. Thanks so much for sticking to the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. We'll make more videos soon.